Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much for this opportunity to participate in this fascinating symposium and to really examine the nexus between science and society. Today I'd like to focus on this concept of the post-truth world and what does that mean for what scientists do and how they do it. And I want to look at this through the lens of what's happening in the ocean and what ocean scientists are doing, especially in focusing not just on identifying problems, but identifying solutions, working with society in different ways than they have before, with two examples from fisheries and from marine protected areas, which I believe is giving us good reason for hope for the future. I think it's intensely ironic that at the very time when the importance of science is greater than ever before to society, we're seeing an increasing disconnect between science and society. Much of this is driven by this post-truth world that we seem to have landed in, that had crept up, although it has been emerging for a while, that is being driven by a wide variety of things, but really came to a head in the 2016 elections around the world, where science and evidence, facts count for a lot less than just beliefs or assertions. So much so that the Oxford English Dictionary identified post-truth as the 2016 year of the word, word of the year, thank you. 20 years ago now, I invited scientists to join with me in re-examining the contract that scientists have with society, focusing on what are our responsibilities to be most helpful to society in communicating more broadly what we know and what we don't know, not just publishing in the peer-reviewed literature, and focusing on the most urgent problems. I'm seeing this through new light today in this post-truth world, and I believe that scientists need to not just ignore what's going on in the underlying drivers of this post-truth society, but really understand the phenomena that are behind this and address those reasons, not just be doing the same things. We can't do so if we are seen as being elite and above the fray. We need to be embedded more in society. We need to engage more differently. What does that actually mean? Part of it is shedding some of the entitlement rhetoric that often pervades our discussions of science, making science more accessible, understandable, more relevant, seen as being trustworthy because the people who are using it are understanding it better. And that also means scientists being seen as being warm and caring, not just as experts. I also believe that we need to be providing hope, not just identifying all the problems. And indeed, there are a wealth of good things happening around the world. We tend to ignore those and hop right to the problems. And I think a balanced treatment, understanding how incredibly challenging the problems are, but shining us a spotlight on some of the hope is also important. I see this through the lens of what's happening in the ocean, and I present to you an image of the ocean that is a map you may not have seen before, and I use it to illustrate the fact that it's a single ocean. The ocean connects us, it doesn't divide us. It sustains us, it feeds us. It's our past and it is our future. The ocean has historically provided a wealth of things to people, some of which people understand, like food, some of which they don't, like climate regulation, but it's all part of our planetary life support system. Food is particularly important, and when you think about food security, you cannot ignore food from the ocean, either wild capture fisheries or aquaculture, as part of our future. Today, ocean ecosystems are significantly depleted and disrupted. They are polluted, they are warmer, they're higher, they're more acidic, and they are less resilient as a result of a wide variety of activities on land and in the ocean. Because they're less predictable, because they are depleted, this causes all sorts of problems for all those benefits that we want and need from intact, healthy, resilient ocean ecosystems. The drivers are multiple. I'm going to focus on just a few of these: overfishing and the loss of safe havens for wildlife and protection for ocean ecosystems. Not to ignore the others, but just as some tangible way to give you some specifics. So fishery management, number one. We have had unsustainable fishery management practices for decades and decades and decades, and it is catching up with us. And this has some real consequences, especially for the most vulnerable people around the world. However, we have learned that a lot of our fishing practices have been incredibly wasteful. Science is driving a new way of understanding what is possible from the ocean. And part of this means fishing smarter, not harder, being less wasteful, and fishing in a way that changes incentives for fishermen, for the primary actors, to align their short-term and long-term interests. This fishing smarter, not harder, is resulting in some major changes, major successes for which a lot of people are unaware. During the 4 years that I served on the first term of the Obama administration, we saw a major flip in our fisheries. I'm going to compare 2 years for you, the year 2000 and 2016. We had 92 stocks of federally managed fisheries in the U.S. that were overfished in the year 2000. By the year 2016, as a result of changes that we put in place, that had been slashed by 2/3. The number of rebuilt stocks has increased from 0 to 43. 43 stocks of fish that were previously depleted and now have been rebuilt so that they can again be fished. This is a major success story, and it was done at a time when we now have, in the last couple years, increases in catches, increases in value, and increases in jobs. So there's an opportunity here to tap into the resilience of the ocean if we get fishery management right. These changes that we adopted are now being embraced globally in 40 different countries. Secure access fisheries is a different way of managing fisheries, and it works in developing as well as developed countries. Calculations by my colleagues, Steve Gaines, Chris Costello, and their colleagues at Environmental Defense Fund and UC Santa Barbara suggest that, in fact, the trajectory that we have of decreasing stocks through time, the green line there, that if we do business as usual, is bound to continue going down, could in fact be reversed. The teal blue line that you see going upward and to the right is a hopeful situation if we could put in place the kinds of changes that we've seen work so well. So there is strong incentive to get on with doing this. So a scientific solution here is to fish smarter, not harder, and changing economic incentives is key. The second problem I'm highlighting for you is loss of marine protected areas. It used to be the case that almost all of the ocean was a de facto marine protected area. It was too far away, it was too inaccessible, it was too deep. We now fish, mine, and drill virtually every place in the ocean. There are no more safe havens where habitats and biodiversity can be protected. So the problem is loss of these safe havens. Science, again, is driving an understanding of what those fully protected marine areas can deliver for us, and we're learning that when you create a protected area and have no extractive activities inside, you can have a wealth of plants and animals and microbes inside. The bounty can be recovered, and it spills out to adjacent areas and can help replenish depleted fisheries outside. We also know that in protecting the big individuals, big fishes, big lobsters, big crabs, big squid, whatever, those big mamas and papas are the ones that have the most reproductive potential. This is a vermilion rockfish, the redfish on the left side. It produces 150,000 young. If you let it grow to about twice its size, it produces 1.7 million young. So a little bit larger size means a lot more young. So these marine reserves, fully protected marine areas, have the potential to recover the lost bounty that can spill over and help fisheries. And we are learning they are critically important in providing resilience to climate change. They are less likely to bleach. For example, they're more likely to recover from bleaching when it does happen. So this is a very important tool for both mitigation and adaptation. Globally implemented marine protected areas of all kinds were less than 1% a decade ago. We're now up to about 3.6%. So that's a drop in the bucket. But that very steep rise is because of this new science, and there's new energy around this, such that many countries have agreed to protect 10% of the ocean by the year 2020. We're not quite on track to do that, and most experts are calling for actually protecting 30% by 2030. That's going to be a tall order, and the high seas will be critically important for that, not just the areas within countries' own exclusive economic zones. So across these two examples of fishery reforms and marine protected areas, we're seeing some common threads. Incentives are critically important in changing behavior. Some of that incentive can be economic incentives, and I mentioned flipping the economic incentives for fishermen as a key to reforming fisheries. Equally important are changing social incentives, whether they're social norms, what your friends and colleagues do, or whether they're personal norms, which is what Pope Francis has focused on. What is right? What do I believe is the right thing to do? Changing incentives can make a world of difference. And we're seeing that the right incentives can convert a vicious cycle of unsustainable practices to a virtuous cycle of sustainable practices. Now, this does not mean that anything is possible. It doesn't mean we can't reverse things that are irreversible, but it means that if we act sooner rather than later, there is hope that we can turn a lot of these problems around by being more efficient and changing social norms, changing economic incentives. So these are some new tools in our toolbox that science is delivering to society that I believe are giving us hope that, in fact, we can have a more sustainable future that is also more just. Not easy, not challenging. I mean, not easy, very, very challenging. But I think we have some reasons, some glimmers of hope, and the fact that scientists are engaging so actively in working with society to find solutions, not just identify problems, which is characteristic of environmental sciences. You know, it's all doom and gloom. That is changing. And I think we should take heart that things are changing and do everything we can within the reward system of science to help encourage more of the same. So scientists are engaging with society to create solutions. Those solutions exist, but they're not at the scale that we need yet. They're not happening fast enough, they are not over large enough areas, but they are possible, and I think we need to get on with making that happen. Thank you very much.